It was a cold, blustery afternoon when David Thompson received the letter that would change his life forever. David was an ordinary man with an unremarkable job in an unremarkable town. His life was a series of monotonous routines, punctuated by the occasional outing with friends or an infrequent date. But this letter, with its ornate, old-fashioned script and mysterious seal, promised something far from ordinary. "Dear Mr. Thompson," it began, "it is with great pleasure that I inform you of your inheritance of Maplewood Manor, her grand estate left to you by your late great-uncle, Archibald Thompson." David blinked, rereading the letter to ensure he hadn't misunderstood. He had no recollection of a great-uncle Archibald, nor did he recall ever hearing about Maplewood Manor. Curiosity piqued. He decided to take a trip to the address provided, eager to uncover the mystery of his sudden windfall. The drive to Maplewood Manor took David through winding country roads and dense forests that seemed to grow darker as he approached his destination. By the time he reached the gates of the manor, the sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows over the grand but dilapidated estate. Maplewood Manor was imposing, with tall, narrow windows and an intricately carved wooden door that seemed to leer at him. The garden was overgrown, and ivy climbed the walls as if trying to reclaim the house for nature. Despite its state of disrepair, there was something undeniably majestic about the manor. David pushed open the creaking gate and made his way to the front door. As he inserted the heavy, brass key into the lock, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a ground floor covered in dust and cobwebs. The air inside was musty, and the dim light filtering through the windows gave the place an almost ethereal quality. David's first night at Maplewood Manor was uneventful but unsettling. He explored the manor, finding room after room filled with old furniture, faded portraits, and peculiar artifacts. As night fell, the creaks and groans of the old house kept him on edge. Every so often, he could swear he heard footsteps or whispers, but he convinced himself it was just the house settling. The next morning, David decided to venture into the nearby village to gather supplies and perhaps learn more about his new home. The villagers were a curious lot, eyeing him with a mix of suspicion and pity when he mentioned Maplewood Manor. "Oh, you've inherited the haunted house," an elderly woman said with a shiver. "Best of luck to you, dear. No one's lived there in decades." "Haunted?" David chuckled nervously. "Surely you don't believe in ghosts?" The woman's eyes narrowed. "Believe what you will, young man, but you'll see soon enough." Back at the manor, David couldn't shake the villagers' words from his mind. That night, as he lay in the massive four-poster bed, the house seemed to come alive around him. He heard faint music, like a distant piano playing an old tune, and laughter echoing through the halls. Determined to prove to himself that it was all in his head, David got up and followed the sounds. They led him to a grand ballroom, where an old gramophone was spinning, though he hadn't touched it. The room was filled with an eerie light, and as he approached the gramophone, it abruptly stopped. "Okay, very funny," David said aloud, his voice echoing in the empty room. "Who's there?" There was no answer, just the creak of the floorboards and the whisper of the wind through the broken windows. David sighed and returned to bed, but sleep did not come easily. In the following days, David continued to explore the manor, uncovering its secrets bit by bit. One afternoon, he discovered a hidden room behind a bookcase in the library. Inside was a portrait of a stern-looking man in Victorian attire, his great-uncle Archibald, David presumed. The eyes of the portrait seemed to follow him, and he felt a chill run down his spine. "What were you hiding, Uncle Archibald?" David mused, looking around the room. It was filled with old books, journals, and curious artifacts. He picked up a dusty journal and began to read. The journal belonged to Archibald Thompson, and as David read, he discovered a tale of obsession and madness. Archibald had been a man of science, deeply interested in the occult and the supernatural. He believed that Maplewood Manor was a gateway to another realm, a place where spirits could cross into the living world. David shivered as he read about Archibald's experiments, his attempts to communicate with the dead, and the strange occurrences that plagued the manor. Archibald's final entry was particularly chilling. "I have succeeded. The veil is thin here, and they are coming. God help us all." That night, as David tried to sleep, he felt a cold presence in the room. He opened his eyes to see a figure standing at the foot of his bed, a tall man in Victorian clothing with hollow eyes and a sinister smile. "Welcome, David," the figure said in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the grave. "I've been waiting for you." David scrambled out of bed, heart pounding. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure stepped forward, and David could see through him he was a ghost. "I am Archibald Thompson, your great-uncle, and I need your help." In the days that followed, David and the ghost of Archibald formed an uneasy alliance. Archibald explained that his experiments had indeed opened the gateway to the spirit world, but he had been unable to close it before his death. The manor was now a hub of supernatural activity, and only a living descendant could perform the ritual to seal the gateway. David was skeptical but desperate to end the haunting. Archibald guided him through the manor's hidden rooms and secret passages, revealing the tools and ingredients needed for the ritual. As they worked together, David couldn't help but notice that Archibald's intentions seemed ambiguous. Was he truly seeking to close the gateway, or did he have another, darker plan? The night of the ritual was stormy, with lightning flashing and thunder shaking the manor's foundations. David gathered the necessary items: a ceremonial dagger, ancient texts, and a collection of strange herbs, and set up the ritual in the ground ballroom. As he began to chant the incantations, the temperature in the room dropped, and the air grew thick with malevolent energy. Ghosts appeared, swirling around him, their faces twisted in anger and sorrow. Archibald's ghost stood by, watching intently. "Keep going," Archibald urged. "You're almost there." As David reached the climax of the ritual, he realized something was wrong. The ghosts weren't being banished, they were becoming more powerful. Archibald's sinister smile returned, and David understood too late that he had been deceived. "Thank you, David," Archibald said, his voice dripping with malice. "You've done exactly what I needed. The gateway is now fully open, and I will have my revenge on the living." David tried to stop the ritual, but it was too late. A blinding flash of light filled the room, and the ghosts surged forward, their screams deafening. Desperate and terrified, David fought against the spectral onslaught. He remembered a counter-ritual he had read in Archibald's journal and began to recite it. The ghosts shrieked in fury, and the room shook as if the very walls were protesting. Archibald's ghost tried to intervene, but David's determination was stronger. With a final, powerful incantation, the portal began to close, sucking the spirits back into the other realm. Archibald's ghost was pulled toward the gateway, his face a mask of rage. "No, this cannot be," he screamed as he was dragged into the abyss. When the ritual was finally complete, the manor was eerily silent. The ghosts were gone, and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. Exhausted, David collapsed to the floor, his heart still racing. In the days that followed, David slowly repaired the manor, determined to restore it to its former glory. The villagers, once wary of him, began to warm up, their fear of the haunted house dissipating. David often thought about the night he had faced the spirits and his great-uncle's betrayal. Maplewood Manor was no longer a place of dread but a symbol of his courage and resilience. As he sat on the porch, watching the sunset, he knew that he had finally found his place in the world. Years later, Maplewood Manor became a renowned bed and breakfast, famous for its history and beautiful architecture. Guests often remarked on the sense of peace and tranquility that pervaded the place, unaware of the dark secrets it once held. David Thompson, the man who had tamed the haunted manor, became a local legend. Though he rarely spoke of the horrors he had faced, his story was passed down through generations, a testament to the power of bravery and determination. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind rustled through the trees, Visitors claimed they could hear faint music and laughter, a reminder that Maplewood Manor would always hold a touch of the supernatural. But David knew that as long as he was there, the spirits would remain at peace, and the gateway would stay closed.